Out here, the woods don't lie. Every trail tells a story, and we're here to read it. This is the Field Days Podcast, where passion meets habitat. Hosted by Jason Say, whitetail enthusiast and food plot guru. Brought to you by Magnet Outdoors Premium Food Plot Seeds, because big bucks start with a well-planned strategy.
Hello and welcome to the Field Days Podcast. I have a show today I'm really super excited about, mainly because most of my shows, a lot of times, I guess I'm considered the expert and stuff. Today, I am not the expert. I have Justin Henderson here, who is a product specialist from Great Plains. And Great Plains is a new sponsor here at All In, at Field Days, at Magnet Outdoors, and it's an iconic brand. I'm so pumped to have them. I've been thinking about it, and we're going to get into more of what led me to this and where I'm at. But Justin, I just wanted to say thanks and welcome to the show.
Yeah, sure thing, Jason. We're glad to have you on board as well, and I'm looking forward to seeing what all comes of this here.
Yep. So I'm excited as well, and we're going to talk about it. Before we get into talking about drills and the advantages of drills, disadvantages of drills, different ways you can plant. We're just going to take a quick break, thank a couple of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to talk to Justin. I am happy to announce a brand new sponsor here at the Field Days Podcast, and it is 12 Point Hunting Blinds. And I've had the privilege of hunting out of these blinds for the last couple of years, and I was on a property consult earlier this year, and I asked my client what he did for a living, and he said he was one of the owners of 12 Point Hunting Blinds, and my eyes lit up, and I said, we need to talk. And we need to talk because these are the best blinds that I have ever hunted out of. They've thought of every little detail, from just the silent technology, the easy access, and I truly believe that their blinds are completely scent proof. I've so many times had deer directly downwind that never smelled us. So I encourage you, check them out, find out for yourself. But again, hands down, best hard-sided hunting blind I've ever hunted out of. For more information on all their blinds, visit 12pointhuntingblinds.com. I plant over 30 acres in food plots every single year, and I cannot afford to be losing time with equipment that is not reliable or gets the job done. And I'm proud to have Coons Engineering as my equipment sponsor here at Field Days. Their equipment is built like a tank, from their mower that I can create a new plot to mow my perennial plots, to their cultipackers, to the chisel plow that you see me using all the time that I use with just my quad to break ground and plant new food plots. If you're looking for good quality food plot equipment, I encourage you, check out the very best at KUNZENG.com. Okay, we are back, and as you know, I have Justin here from Great Plains. He's a product specialist, and I just want to give a little bit of background here, Justin, on how all this came about, because I'm going to tell you a story of a guy who came on Facebook the other day. I put my first post of the drill, and he wasn't real happy with me, and I'll tell you what he said and how I explained it. My goal here at Field Days, I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm in the Northeast. We're not in the Midwest. I know a lot of people follow me from New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, down to Kentucky, Michigan, Indiana, more of that Northeast section of the country. And I have planted food plots pretty much every method possible. I've done them with garden rakes and a sickle and a hand sprayer. I've done them with a four-wheeler and a drag harrow, four-wheeler and a set of discs, four-wheeler and a chisel plow, that I have from Coons that you see me using all the time, tractor and discs, tractor and tiller. So I've literally planted food plots, in so many different ways. And my goal, one thing that bothers me a little bit about, some of the guys I see, there's a lot of really smart guys out there, and it bothers me when I see a guy say, this is the only way to do it, and unless you do it this way, you're being irresponsible, and things like that, because every method has its advantages and disadvantages. And I'm going to go through those methods and talk about them. But the thing that brings me to this is I've been watching guys using seed drills for a long time, and reading about it and looking at it, and really starting to understand soil and planting food plots for 18 years. I just said, now's the time that, man, I want to take the plunge, and I want to start using a seed drill and demonstrate that and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that as well. Because like I said, every method has its advantages. Every method has its disadvantages, but I want food plotting to be for the guy that's on a
a real tight budget that I show him how to go out and plant one with a yard rake and a hand sprayer, and a guy that's middle of the range has a tractor and a set of discs, and then a guy that maybe is a little bit better, he can go the seed drill route, and so just breaking those down and talking to you about the advantages and disadvantages real quick here of the different methods. Doing one with hand tools, right? I think we all know what the disadvantages are. I've done it. I told the guys I'm not doing it anymore. It's a lot of work. It's hard, right? It's a lot of work.
Sure.
And that's the idea of getting bigger and better equipment, is that it makes your life easier, right? And usually a little bit more you spend, a little bit easier your life gets, and so when I first started 18 years ago, I planted 2 or 3 hand tool food plots. I filmed those. You can see them. They grew great. And it was with nothing but went in with a sickle, then went in with a hand sprayer, and then went in with a yard rake, and then went in with a garden rake, just roughed up the soil and had a beautiful food plot. But man, we sweated our butts off. So you better have lots of friends if you want to do that. And that's the disadvantage. It's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you've ever done a hand tool food plot, Justin, but it's not fun.
I don't even know I may have started one, Jason, back in the day, but I'm not sure I completed it.
Yeah.
I remember I used to take, when I was little, I mean, I was before I was driving. I used to take the stuff to sell at Walmart. It's called the throw and grow or whatever. Just take that out and pitch that out. And that's what we would do, or we, meaning me. I thought I had some friends out there. I was trying to talk to myself to make this excruciating work go by faster, but and I guess that's just how you start. You got to get in there some way, and that's what this is all about.
That's right. Yeah, and you move up, and that's what I did, and I realized, okay, I want to plant more food plots, and it's just not. I mean, you're only going to do so many food plots in a year if you're doing nothing but hand tools. That's just
you bet.
You're going
to
run
are
out of
constraints.
time, unless you got 100 friends that are going to go out and do it for you. But other than that,
and I may have had 100 friends before, but after that job was over, I didn't have any more friends.
I've always noticed during the food plot planting time, friends tend to disappear. You know who your good friends are when they're still around at that point in time. So, but hey, come hunting season, man, I saw those pictures of your food plots and all those deer. That's
first week in November, they're all back.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, we talked about hand tools. And then you kind of move up to the next step where, okay, hey, I got a 4-wheeler and I got a little set of discs for the back. Or, I did one year that was really, really successful. I went in and I took a weed whacker, weed whacked it. Then I raked off all the, the thatch, and then I sprayed it, and it got, and then I went in just with the drag harrow on a 4-wheeler and just went in circles. And you know what? I had a great looking food plot. And so then moving from the, and the advantages of that are it's relatively cheap, right? But again, it's a lot of work. You're going round and round and round and round. It takes time to get that ground where you want it to be, but it can be an effective method, and so then I moved up, and still I do a lot of, to this day, I'm still going to do a lot of food plots with my quad, just because of where I have to get to. I can't get a tractor there and things like that. And, I moved up to, a quad and a chisel plow. Guys see me using the Coons Engineering chisel plow all the time. It's one of my favorite tools, because the issue I always found with quads and disc was that there's not enough weight, right? You couldn't get enough weight pulling. And if you did, you just beat your quad up. Well, the chisel plow does it in a completely different way. The way it's designed, it digs, man. It was a game changer for me. And I'm going to use it in certain scenarios till the day I die. And the positives for that are, 1, it does a great job. 2, it's easy to get places, right? It goes up on wheels. You take your quad. I mean, it's 4 feet wide, 3 feet. I mean, you can get it anywhere, so that's one of the real advantages. A little bit more expensive, right? We're starting to go up in expense range, and and then the next thing, after the quad and stuff like that, now it's you got a tractor, right? And I have a Kubota 49 horse tractor, and I have a set of discs for it. We have a tiller for it. I've used both, both of those, kind of interchangeable. I don't use a tiller as much anymore, only in certain scenarios, just because it really beats up your soil. And, the more I've learned and things like that, the less I want to do. But if I got a tough weed problem, a tiller is a good way to go in and really, cut those weeds up and possibly help with, if you got a tough weed that herbicides potentially won't control. So there's some advantages to that. Discs are the main thing I use. besides a tiller with my tractor, and and they pretty much do the same thing as the chisel plow, but just bigger and faster. If you can get a tractor there with a set of discs, and and actually I have a new set of discs from Great Plains, and I'm excited to use. They look heavy duty. Not going to have any trouble digging in with those. So you're still going to see me discing. And then the next level, in my opinion, is what we're here to talk about today is seed drills. And it's I guess the final, step in the evolution for me, and kind of
Right.
doing all the things. Now, I do want to say I put a post on Facebook the other day, and man, everybody was really excited. I think it was like 35,000 views, but people have followed me for so long, and they said, "We knew you'd come to the dark side. Welcome, to drilling your seed." And I was like, "Hey, I'm still going to be using other methods, but I'm really excited about it too." But I had one guy come in, one guy. I
Mhm.
mean, and Justin, he flipped his lid. He's like, I knew it. I knew you'd get so big someday, and now you got money, and money talks, and you don't care. And you always promised us that you would do food plots that the common man could do. And I mean, he just heard me, and I was like, hold
Yep.
on, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're not going to hear me say this is how you have to do it. I simply want to show you all the different ways that you can plant a food plot, what the advantages,
Yes.
I want everybody to plant food plots. Everybody has different means. And yes, when we're talking seed drills, we're talking another level of expense. It's expensive, and
Bingo.
it's going to
You're right.
price certain guys out of it. So that's why you're not necessarily going to see me. I couldn't use a seed drill on all my plots because, quite frankly, I can't get it to a lot of them. So you're still going to see me
hmm
using a disc and a chisel plow with my quad and a harrow and things like that. But where I can get that seed drill to, I feel it's my responsibility to say, hey guys, here's the options out there. Here's the advantages. Here's the disadvantages, right? And Justin, that's
Right.
really what we wanted you here today to talk about seed drills and what the advantages, what the disadvantages. We're going to have you talk about the line that I'm using specifically, which is more obviously my listeners are a lot of food plotters. We're not crop farmers for the most part. Now there are some crop farmers that listen to me and have all the big equipment, but there's a lot of guys listening to me that they're planting 3 or 4 food plots, maybe 1 or 2, is what they're planning. So what I want to do is have you talk about just seed drills in general, and what the
Okay.
advantages and what the disadvantages are,
Okay.
and scenarios that you use them. And then we'll get in, and I want to talk about specifically your product line. We'll talk about the product that I'm using and why I'm using it, some of the advantages, disadvantages, and things like that. And the first thing I'll say, Justin and I were talking a little bit before we got started, and Justin made a really good point. We talked about some of the disadvantages. We're going to just shoot you straight on the different lines, and some things might not be a good fit for what you're looking to do. And I encourage everybody, if you have questions on seed drills, I know I'm going to be calling Justin on a regular basis, right? And before you make an investment on a piece of equipment like this, because it is expensive, right? And especially to food plotters that, a lot of them, they're used to, $2,000 set of discs and
Yeah.
4-wheeler and things like that. It's a
Mhm.
big investment. So I would encourage you, call the folks at Great Plains. It's an iconic brand. And the thing that I've made my career on, and that Justin said the same thing, you don't get where we're at by bamboozling people and trying to talk people into a quick sale. Because if the product's not going to
Mhm.
work for you, it's not going to work for the company. So when you're making an investment like this, we would say, listen, give the folks at Great Plains a call, talk to them, tell them what your needs are, and they're going to get you in the right seed drill for sure. So that all being said, Justin, I'll turn it over to you and talk a little bit about the benefits, the advantages, maybe some of the disadvantages of just not even specifically the product specifically, but seed drills in general. Why would a food plotter want to use a seed drill?
Yeah. So that's a very good question, Jason. And I mean that's really the only place to start really. Um, it the first almost let me start with the disadvantages to broadcasting and that sort of idea first, so that we can kind of build a base on what we're getting with drilling. So we're broadcasting seed, like I've done a whole bunch, and like everybody that has probably planted some sort of a food plot in their lifetime has done. They, broadcast the seed and you just figure out how to get some dirt on top of it, right? Whether like what you were talking about was, pulling four-wheeler around with some sort of little drag hair on it, whether it's using, hand tools and hand rakes and stuff. When we go to broadcast the seed, we still got to do some sort of I'm gonna call it a tillage action, whatever that may be, to disturb the soil and get some sort of dirt on top of the seed, excuse me. And in my eyes, there's a couple of downsides to that. One, we're basically asking for some level of predation. Birds, down here in the South, we've got hogs. I mean, if the seed is not at least out of sight, kind of one of those out of sight, out of mind things, if it's not just laying on top of the ground, we're already winning fractionally, from our broadcasting method. Past that, we've got our seed to soil contact. And that's where, we're really getting into some advantages of actually drilling the seed into a furrow, getting proper depth, proper seed placement, contact with directly to the bottom of that seed trench to the soil, and then it's covered up. Right. So we're taking away a level of that predation. I'm not going to say that it is completely gone at that point just because you drilled it, because birds got beaks, legs. I out there digging and scratching and stuff like that. And pigs down here in the Southeast is the same thing. I mean, we can, go out and drill food plots. We meaning, I guess, all of us rednecks here in the Southeast, if you want to call it that. But and then you can go behind, the next day sometimes after drills have run. You can just see where pigs have just, went down the line and rooted it up. So it's not necessarily an end all be all, right? But there are massive, massive, massive advantages to to drill and seed. And like I said, the way I see it is, the two big ones is seed to soil contact and moisture retention, because that's if we're not getting that seed down there to the correct depth where the moisture's at and retaining some of that moisture that's in the soil, our germination is going to go way down. Our plot's not going to look as good, and then we're going to be, we're kind of like, well, wait, I thought we was actually supposed to be planting for emergence here, So if we're not, taking the steps to get our end result that we're looking for, we're spinning in circles, if you will. And also, with drilling, we've got to look at erosion control at some point too, because that factors in there as well. If we're just, year after year after year after year, taking a disc, and going and just running over the surface, scratching top, pitching some seed out there, that's fine, and it will work. I've done it myself, and I've seen it work. But there are just ways to improve upon that. One of the downsides to that practice, is over these years after year after year of just doing that one practice of, just kind of barely scratching the top of the soil, disturbing a little bit, whether it's weed kill you're after, whether it's just wanting to turn some dirt over and, where you can at least see some dirt that you're going out there and throwing some seed on. The disadvantages to that, there again, talking on broadcasting, is the erosion control and the compaction layer that we're going to create doing that.
Yeah.
So we'll eventually get to a point, where, the top inch and a half, however deep you're getting, below that, we're going to get to a point where, we're going to get some sort of a hard pan developed, and then our roots are going to kind of start growing this way instead of going down. And then, our emergence is not as great, if we're years down the road, kind of doing this minimum tillage action broadcasting sort of thing like I've been talking about. There's long-term disadvantages down the road, if you want to go there. And that's where a drill sort of solves those disadvantages, to a point. I'm not there's nuances to every situation, like you and I were talking about beforehand. But for the most part, drilling seed into the ground is going to sort of mediate a few of those disadvantages that we're working with if we're not drilling seed.
Yeah.
Um,
And Justin, I just to jump in here for just a second, and
yeah.
the two biggest things in all my reading, watching videos, researching, looking at this method of drilling, the number one thing that attracted me was like the third thing you listed, and that was erosion control.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those long-term food plotters. I've been planting food plots for 18 years. I've seen a little bit of that, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
now, like, I'm playing with a lot of soil builder blends, right? And
Mm-hmm.
turning those back into the soil. I took a plow in, like you talked about hard pan. I took a plow in just to turn all of them over, because of that hard pan and stuff. A lot of
Right.
extra work, but again, really just beating up that soil. And that to me personally was the biggest thing that attracted me was the erosion control, and also getting the exact seed depth that you want, the
Yep.
the preciseness of it. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see, because if you go look at my food plots, I've been really successful doing it the way that I've done it for years. So it's a lot of pressure, saying like, okay, is it gonna make it better? But what I'm hopes are, I don't think my food plots can look any better or grow any better, but my hopes are it grows as good, and I'm doing that erosion control on top of it, right? That I'm going to have as good a results, but at the same time, I'm taking better care of my soil for that long-term health to be able to plant that food plot for many, many years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that, kind of, gave guys an idea of the benefits of planning with the drill. Obviously, we talked about this before. The disadvantages is probably the most expensive way. You can, it's probably the most expensive tool you can get as far as a food plotter.
Yep.
But there's a ton of advantages to it. So let's get in here, Justin, unless there's anything else you want to talk about on, the advantages and disadvantages and things like that. Let's get in and talk about let's talk about your line of drills overall, but then I really want to get into the stealth series, which is the ones you made for the I don't want to call us lower end food plotters, right? But Great Plains is making equipment for guys with huge farms, huge, and we're talking about a group of guys that they're using this to plant food plots for deer.
Yes.
So you guys have come out with a new line, really looking at that target audience, which is awesome. So maybe talk to us a little bit about your line of drills that you have, a little bit about the differences, but then really get into the Stealth Pro and what that's all about.
Sure. So Great Plains has been, manufacturing compact drills, for quite a while. Compact, I'm going to call it, we as a company, 10 foot and below. So, we'll make a 10-footer, we'll make a 7-foot, make a 6-foot version, that if you look online, will look similar to our Stealth Pro stuff, our Stealth Pro line that we've got out. The cool thing about that is, sort of that crossover is like you mentioned too earlier, we have created a product line to target, a specific audience, that we know is not going out here and having to use this equipment throughout the year, like say production ag, farmers will. But what we've done is we've taken those tried and true, the row unit specifically off of those compact drills for our production acreage guys, if you want to call it that. And we've carried over some of those similar aspects into the Stealth Pro line. So you're getting production ag versatility and dependability on a food plot drill, right? I mean, what else could you ask for at the end of the day? Because we know what we're offering, and in that sense, you know what you're getting. Like you're getting something that is going to last you a very long time. You'll get a return on investment out of it. Maybe that's horns on your wall. For this example, and it's not corn standing out in the field. We're wanting to hang some shoulders up on the wall. So
Right.
That's kind of the idea we had in mind with it, with that Stealth Pro line, and drills were first. So we've got a 3, 4, and a 5-foot model that is it's actually built by Schmeiser, TG Schmeiser in California. And then we work hand in hand with them on, design, the whole way through the process. So the box up top, like the drill that you've got, our boxes and everything, that's what's sort of designed by Smizer. And then the row unit down below, uh, coulter, whether you have it with or without a coulter, opening discs, closing wheels, the whole mechanism underneath, which is the most important part, because that's what we're getting the seed in the ground with, that's ours. That's what manufactured, designed by Great Plains. It's been around for years. It just works. I really don't know how else to describe it other than that. And there's a value in simplicity at some point, right? You just set it up and you just go use it. It's very simple process. So that's the 3, 4, and 5 foot models. And like we were talking about a little bit before we started here, those 3, 4, and 5 foot models have the option to come with or without coulters. You can front coulters, not our double discs I'm talking about here, because if you look at, different manufacturers across the line, I'm not going to sit here and harp on nobody else, but if you look at different manufacturers, there will be other companies that are calling, a no-till drill, and there's not a front set of coulters. Coulters, all they've got is a set of opening blades and a closing wheel. I don't like to necessarily use the verbiage, men till or no till necessarily, especially in situations, like what we're talking about, which is, just food plot prep and planning, because it can vary so differently. So it really, it's up to the customer, the end user, to, sort of assess their ground and see or say, okay, I don't really have that much overgrowth in the stuff I'm planting, or I'm already going out and disking it up completely. We're turning everything over, or I just live in, sort of a softer, sandier, loamier soil rather than, some of the red clay that, I've got here around me in Northwest Georgia. Um, so it's really up to the customer to kind of decide whether you need coulters or whether you don't. So we offer it that way so that you could design and pick this thing to work exactly the way the end user needs it to. So along with those 3, 4, and 5 foot models, we've got a 6 foot model. The 3, 4. Let me back up a second here, Jason. The 3, 4, and 5 foot models are 3-point hitch compatible only. It's just hitched directly to the tractor. They're Cat 1 and Cat 2 compatible. Those things also work with a quick hitch. A lot of the guys, with our compact tractors, if you want to, term it that, the quick hitches are pretty prevalent. So we've made these things to work with that way. Like I said, going back a minute ago, we're just going for simplicity and effectiveness here. We've sort of made the process sort of easy. They're easier, I guess you could say. The 6 foot model, like I was mentioning earlier, that is a Great Plains. Like if you go on our website and you look up a Great Plains, a 606 NT, it's going to be the Stealth Pro 6. There's a bunch of carryover. It's going to look the same. The decals are a little bit different. We've got some camo decals on the Stealth Pro 6, but the boxes, row units, the whole nine it's the same drill basically. What we've done there that's different is we've just sort of streamlined the ordering process and the amount of options that you can put on the drill. We've we're talking closing wheels for a second. We've got different offerings of closing wheels for different parts of the country. What we have found is this 2x13 press wheel, rounded top press wheel that we put on these Stealth Pros they're the most effective press wheel for drilling in any condition, right? It's not a blanket, it doesn't matter what kind of conditions you've got, this is going to be the end all be all, but it's the most effective version of a closing wheel that we can offer. So that's what we put on the Stealth Pro line of drills. The 10 foot model is works just kind of like the 6. We've got a 1006 NT. It's very similar to our Stealth Pro 10. There's, a few ordering things that have been streamlined, and we've took the options that, you know, we know work, and we know basically is the most popular with guys that have, bought, let's say, our compact drills over the years. And, we know they're mainly using them for food plots and ground renovation, if you want to call it that. We know what, the, 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 the designs that work the best, and that's what we've put on this Stealth Pro line of drills. On from the drills, Jason, we've also got a 6-foot and 8-foot disc harrow. Like, you've got the 6, right? You've
Yep.
got the 6-foot, or do you have an 8? Okay.
The 6. Yep.
So we've got both of those different sizes in disc harrows, and we've also got a rotary cutter, a 7-foot rotary cutter. So we've sort of built an all-encompassing package. If a guy was to want, just the works, we've got a way to get rid of some of the overgrowth, trim it down with the rotary cutter. If we've got our disc, if so we need it, depending on ground conditions and stuff like that, we've got that offering for those guys that need it. And then, like I said, we've got the drills with or without the coulters. They can be ordered, different configurations. So I feel that we've got most all bases of, our food plot sommeliers, if you want to use that verbiage, covered. We really did try to take all parts of the country and make a product that can fit everywhere.
Yeah.
And I believe it does.
Yeah. I know I'm excited. I mean, like I said, I have the disc, I have the drill. Just to go back to one of your points, just to talk a little bit, because I'm learning this all as well too. So with, like, for instance, the size of the drills that you can get is going to be heavily dictated by the size of your tractor, right?
Yes, sir.
These are a heavy piece of equipment. So, I got a 49 horsepower Kubota. I pretty much got, I think, about the biggest drill I could get for that, right? I got the 4-footer. And I don't want to go much bigger than that. The other thing too was, on my drill, it didn't have the coulters, correct? So, like, I don't have the coulters that you talked about. And we talked about this a little bit before the show, and this is just something, when guys talk to be aware of, and that I'm hoping that, I can avoid, because, like I said, the big thing to me, the whole thing, is soil erosion. That's one of the most attractive things to me about a seed drill. But when you don't have those coulters, sometimes drilling into extremely dry conditions, those coulters are going to open that up, that you can drill easily into those types of conditions, where if you don't have them, it's kind of, maybe you need to go in and do to break the ground a little bit, like you said, an inch up. So what would be the ways that you would recommend on that? Would you recommend just a real light disking? Could you do it with a drag harrow? Could you go in and just drag it and just get a little wee bit of the soil roughed up, then that would work? And I know we talked about this before, and you said there's a million variables, and I've heard guys say this over and over. You have to play with your drills. Like, you're going to figure out what works, what's not working. There's not okay, this, and it has to be this, and you're going to have to play with it a little bit. And that's at least what I've taken, and everything that I've read about what guys have said about their drills, is figuring a lot of the different things out. But that is one thing. So what's your recommendation on that? If you had extremely dry soil, you have the Stealth Pro that maybe doesn't have the coulters, to go in, and what would you say to do to the soil in order to be able to use that drill?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple places to start there, Jason. One, like, let's look at, I'm gonna call it overgrowth. What is present already? What's growing already? How tall is it? How thick is it? Do you want it there when fall time comes here? Do you still want to look at what's already growing there, or does it need to just be dead and gone where we can start over? So those are some questions to ask at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then secondly, my answer to that question would be to disturb whatever equipment or methods of operation that you have to disturb the soil. Let's do that as minimally as possible. 2 reasons again. 1, on the erosion control, and 2 is, what we don't want to do if we're already dry is go in there and turn the dirt over, make it drier, by, airing out from the sun and wind and that sort of thing, and then trying to, plant seed into, virtually drier soil than we started with, we're sort of working against ourselves there. And that's one of the nuances, that I catch myself sometimes talking to, you know, guys in all walks of life. Don't matter if we're production ag, if we're, food plot guys on the weekends, whatever the case may be. There's always a conversation that comes to head when there is a thing as it's too dry. Like it's just
Hard as a rock.
right. It doesn't matter, what method of getting seed in the ground we use. Sometimes it's just going to be too dry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing to keep in that I at least try to keep at the forefront of people's mind, when I'm talking to them, because it's not just because we own a drill doesn't mean we're going to have, you know, a, a the best food plot in the world. That doesn't correlate. There are so many variables that go in between, the starting and end product.
That's right.
But there what we do is, offer the best product to get that job done.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. And I think the moral of the story is again, call you guys, go through
Yes.
what your needs are, what your existing equipment is, right? Because,
Yes.
if you say, hey, well, I only got a, 30 horsepower such and such, well, man, you're going to be limited. I got a, 100 horsepower. Okay. Yeah. We can, here's what you can use with that piece of equipment. So there's gonna be a lot of different things that will, at least that's what I'm hearing, that will dictate, what works for you and, in particular conditions. I'm excited. We fortunately have had a real wet summer, surprisingly,
Mhm.
here in the Northeast. So, we have
Mhm.
pretty wet conditions now. I usually plant that first week of August, watch it not rain now until the first week of August. But
Yeah,
but who
jinx
knows?
ourselves.
Yeah. And then, we'll see. But I'm excited because it's gonna be my first go around, and you'll appreciate this. So I believe his name was Sam. It was the guy who delivered the equipment to me, and he
Mhm.
started talking, and my head started to swim a little bit. He's like, well, down here, you want to do this and you want to do that. And I'm a visual guy, right? Like I'm not a sit down and read instructions, right? Everybody thinks different. He said to me, well,
Yep.
I can come back when you plant. Perfect, man. I'll see you. I'll see you in the first week of August, So
Yes.
he's actually going to be coming back, making sure that, that I have it all calibrated correctly, that I'm using it correctly. So I'm looking for, we're going to film that whole process of me, first time using the drill, him here explaining how it's used. But there, what I will say is this, my mindset, it's very different, than what
Mhm.
we've done before,
Mhm.
where it's you go disc, you seed and you drag it and lightly cover it or call it a pack or whatever you want to do. And you're out of there, And so how it works and things like that are a little bit different. That is one question I wanted to ask you. How do drills do with like seed blends? How do they have they? Because for a while I've heard that's a big issue. I've heard they've got a lot better. I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but it's just something
No.
because I plant a lot of blends. How do they do
Mhm.
with blends?
So that was actually, maybe one of the next points that I had jotted down, to kind of get into is that topic right there.
Yeah.
So it, with blends are another one of those variables that we can add into, the scenarios like we were talking about before we started. We offer on, the 6 foot and 10 foot models. Um, I know for sure currently, because that's what those are those are out, manufactured by us completely. Those are offered can be offered optionally with a small seed box attachment to it. So we
Okay.
have a main box that sits up front, and then behind that main box, we've got a small seeds box, which is, alfalfa, clover, all small seeds can be ran through that box. So we're not blends will work well if we have got similar sized and dense seed. Now, if we've got soybeans and clover in one mix, we're going to have, like a 50 square foot area. And this is, way exaggerated, but you get the point of all of our clover is going to be right there. Because the way gravity works, it's a smaller seed, it's going to shake itself down to the bottom and it's going to be gone first. with the small seeds box, you could pull those out, run it in a separate box away from the blend, and then we're getting, broader coverage with our smaller seeds.
Yeah.
That box works off a 1-to-1 ratio with the front box, and it's all, I don't want to get too far in the weeds with that, here, but it's all in our seed rate manuals and charts and all that sort of stuff. So it's very self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But that's one of the huge advantages to adding the small seed box is, we're getting the availability to pull that small seed out and meter it separately.
Yeah.
It's getting planted, in the same furrow, as our other seeds, but it's getting metered separately. And that's a big that even carries over, Jason, into, you know, like our pasture innovation guys, our cattle guys and stuff like that. Clover is not a cheap seed, well as to purchase. It becomes expensive, in anything when we get to, play it in hobbies and whatever the case may be, you can kind of, you know, go as far as you want to necessarily. Um, so that economic price point has got to factor in somewhere, and that's where, I talking on these blends here. If guys ask me that question, oh, well, this is my blend. Can I plant that with it? Yes, you absolutely can. Let's tweak that a little bit. And so the guys that are blending seed, I'd say it's half and half. Half guys are buying a pre-blended deal, and other guys are getting it mixed themselves. If you have the capability when you're getting it mixed yourself to pull those small seeds out of that blend and get them by themselves separately, and you have a drill with a small seeds box, that is the absolute best way to do it. It can be done just by
Yeah.
running all
Okay.
the blends in the same box together. But if you can get those small seeds pulled out and metered through that separate box, it's it does a big difference. You can see the
Yeah.
difference, especially like with clover coverage and stuff like that.
Yeah. Now, do you know, did mine come with that seed box? Do you know if mine came with that seed box? Because I think I'm gonna need that.
I I don't think it did, Jason. I'm not. I don't want to speak with certainty to it, but I don't believe that one came with
Sure.
with the small seeds box, and that may be something. Don't take this for gospel here. I'm gonna have to go back and check for make light of it before the end of the show. But I don't believe those currently our 3, 4s, and 5 foots have the capability for a small seeds box at
I
this
see.
time.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll do some checking on that before we get off, just to be
Yeah.
certain, for our audience here. But
Because
I don't. You're shouldn't
yeah,
have, I don't think.
I own a food plot seed company, Magnet Outdoors. That's what we
Hmm.
do. And we
Hmm.
sell blends, and I'm a
Hmm.
huge proponent of blends. I'm not a
Yes.
monoculture guy. Like I want, a lot of my blends have 7, 8 different seeds in that we've tested that work and play nice together and give a great variety. A lot of those blends are similar size seed, like our chicory infusion blends, our clover and chicory. Our
Hmm.
brassicas, we have some brassica blends that are a smaller seed. But then we have, trifecta, which is my favorite, and it's got oats and winter wheat and brassicas in it. Very,
Hmm.
very, very different. So in that
Yes.
scenario, I may not be able to use a drill for that blend. I might have to plant that in a traditional method. But it'll be interesting to see as I move forward here. How it works and all that good stuff. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it's just something that, because I've heard him talk about that. I've heard that before, of where guys struggle a little bit sometimes with blends with bigger seeds and smaller seeds, in drills and things like that. So you're
Hmm.
saying it will work. It's just going to not blend it real well. It's going to be, all your smaller seeds going to be in one spot and all your bigger seeds going to be in another.
Right. Right. Because we're working with physics at that point. At the end of the day, we're working with physics and gravity, and the smaller stuff, going to be a little bit more dense. Let's take clover seed and oat seed. You know what I mean? Like we're like over here on different ends of the spectrum, from those
Yeah.
two things. So the smaller, more dense, it's going to fall to the bottom first. And so those are, typically going to be the ones to be planted out first. Not to say, to make this, sort of clearer than maybe I did earlier, but not to say that the drill doesn't have the capability of planting and metering and drilling blended seed, but there are just ways in which to make that better. if you will, planting blended seeds,
Sure.
and using the small seeds box offering is the way to make that better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, do you anything else you want to add? I'm going to take a question that I have here from a listener that sent me a good question. I do that every show. Um, like we talked about, and just to kind of wrap up the conversation, I'm super pumped. I'm super excited. Great
Hmm.
Plains is one of those iconic brands that when I called and it's a large company, and I'm like, well, are they going to like a little food plotter? I think I just called at the right time because
Hmm.
you guys were coming out with this new line and for food plotters, and you saw that, and it was just really really good timing. I'm super excited. And to tell all my listeners out there, yeah, you're going to see me using a drill, but you're going to see me using other methods just because, like we talked about, maybe I'm planting a blend that, has big seeds and small seeds. And I just know it's going to be better to do it another way. Or, it's a really tough to get to area that I'm just not going to get, a drill to. But I am super excited about using the drill. I'm super excited in August when Sam comes back and because I was a little overwhelmed, like when I was reading it all and looking at it. I'm like, and he's like, well, you reach down here, and you guys deal with it every day. The first
Hmm.
time using it, it's a little bit intimidating, right? It's a
Hmm.
very different piece of equipment than I've ever used. I baled hay and did things like that, but man, never used a seed drill or really know anything about it. But I am
Yeah.
excited, and I appreciate, the partnership that we have. I look forward to having hopefully a very long partnership and seeing this line really blow up for food plotters, and that it really takes off in that market. And do you anything else you want to add? I know we talked about your customer service. Guys, if your website, what phone number, I don't know if you have any of that or that off the top of your head. Anything else you want to add about the company, the products, whatever?
Yeah. So the, actually, there's something I found on our website last night, and it's on the our Stealth Pro tab of stuff, and it's like what we mentioned earlier, maybe what I alluded to previously, about sort of the carryover from the stuff that we use on production ag equipment is the same dependable manufactured goods that we're using on these drills. So you're not getting necessarily, I don't want to call it necessarily maybe a like not mainstream version, if you will. Like you're not getting a completely separate drill than what we would sell a bean planter guy, or whatever the case may be. You're still getting that same quality of equipment. And there's somebody come up with this. It's on our website, and it says, keeping today's outdoorsman in mind, the Stealth Pro line uses the same quality and manufacturing standards as our production farm equipment, which has been produced since 1976, while also keeping simplicity and functionality at the forefront.
There it is.
I think most of that, I kind of mentioned before we started here, and it's they're posted on the website, and that's our goal, is to take stuff that is dependable, we know it works, and apply it and be able to get this out to more into the hands of more people, because
Guys like me.
right,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
what you alluded to a minute ago, it can be a little bit overwhelming. One, if you've never done it, if you're just completely unfamiliar, and neither of those two are a bad thing. Those are the guys we want. Like I, I,
Mhm.
I want to meet those guys and get this kind of stuff in their hands, because at first it does seem very overwhelming and sort of like a tall task at hand. But there's a little bit of a learning curve. Once you get past that, I'm not going to say it's sort of a set it and forget it thing, because I can't stand that term, because they can get you in trouble. There's not a uniform approach to anything in farming, and we're food plot planting here, so you're getting pretty close to farming. But
Yeah.
so there's not necessarily a blanket, you can't necessarily just set the drill and forget it. But if you're in the same amount of same kind of ground and using the same kind of seed, that's it. I mean, once the drill is calibrated, the drill is calibrated to that specific, seed variety and density and poundage per acre. You just run it. You
Yeah.
just set it down and run it, and it's very simple.
Yeah.
Once it's once you get over that learning curve, it is a very simple task. to complete. And I feel like we have done, a very good job of keeping that simplicity on this line of stuff. I mean, there's, we've got the, our our coulters have an adjustment up front, and I kind of want to get into that a little bit if you don't mind here. I'm probably trying to wrap up, but if you get online and look at these things, you're going to see, features, benefits, and specs and manuals, and you're going to see all this stuff, and it could look a little bit overwhelming. The way that a row unit works, if you've got the ones pulled up, with or without the coulters, I'm going to use the example here that's got the coulters. It sort of works. We can sort of describe it like a seesaw, if you will. The correct way to run the drill is with the openers being level. That's a blanket. That's my blanket answer, if you will. Like, I had make sure our openers are running level. Okay. And we can use that sort of as not necessarily a seesaw effect, but like what you and I were talking about beforehand, we're wanting to distribute that weight that we've got the best that we can.
Mm-hmm.
So we're wanting to penetrate, with that coulter. And then you've seen it, those T handles that we've got out back that we can slide and adjust up and down those holes. That's where we're actually controlling our seed depth. It is from those T handles. So we're sliding it forward and sliding it backwards. And that is what we're actually controlling, how far down or how shallow we're actually placing seed. So there's two adjustments, to get accurate seed depth, and that can be done, in a 10 or 15 minute process. Adjust it, pull forward a little bit. Don't like it, change it. If you do like it, we're rocking and rolling.
Yeah,
it's really simple. It's not hard.
No.
If I can figure it out, it ain't too hard.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I can figure it out. You're probably a little smarter than I am, but I'm sure I'll get it. And I do know first impressions, you touched on this a little bit, is the Great Plains quality in your product and just scaling it down for the food plotter. I can tell you, I can't speak to how it works yet or anything like that because I haven't used it. But what I can tell you is there's no doubts. There's no cheap equipment on this. Like, it's heavy duty, it's built to last. Everything about it is super heavy duty quality. I was able to look over, play with the lid, look at all the pieces to it. There's nothing cheap or flimsy about the product at all. And super impressed, first impressions of how high of a quality it is. And, like I said, just excited to get out there and use it.
For sure. Yeah. And it's kind of, I like telling the story sometimes. It's talking about the perspectives and approaches, beforehand when we were chatting. We've got a family, cattle farm we used to have, back 2 or 3 years ago before we sold out of everything. And before I started with Great Plains in 2020, 3 or 4 years before that, grandfather bought a Great Plains drill. We've got a 1006 we've had since 16 or 17.
Wow.
And Jason, the only thing that we have done to that drill is change our double disc openers. We just put new double disc openers on it, because they got wore out running over rocks and everything else that, we find in our pastures. But speaking to dependability and longevity, upon the initial investment of these things, if we were mentioning, they're not cheap, I guess you could say. But what you're getting is a product that's going to last you a very long time.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not gonna crash on different other brands and that sort of thing. I'm not that guy, but price is usually the top thing that comes up in conversation when you're discussing these, which understandably so. Maybe try to look at it as, or this is the way I try to look at it, is like if we're talking vehicles, right? Great Plains drills, like we're like the Lambo, we're the standard setting, bar setting, like, hey, this is what works. Yeah,
Yep.
like this is the best offering out there. To the others, maybe I don't want to call them great value brands, but everybody is sort of trying to catch Great Plains, if you will. And I have a different perspective on that, just because, even before, I wore this name on my shirt, and I've been working here for, this is year number 6. Before all that, I had exposure to Great Plains, equipment beforehand, and the 4 years of running it before I started here, not an issue one. And you just don't have to work on it. And that's value in and of itself, is the confidence to be able to go into your shed, wherever you keep the drill, the Stealth Pro drills, that you're only going to use. Let's face it, you're only going to use it, what, to the average guy, 6-8 times a year, maybe, if they've got that many food plots. There's value in being able to go in your shed, pull that drill out, take it to the food plot, calibrate, set it down, and run. Like, there's value in that, because you're not having to change stuff, fix stuff, all the jazz that can go into, maintaining and owning equipment. It's just simple. It just work.
Yeah, no. And I know for me, my goal has always been, when I did my research, Great Plains was my first call. When I wanted to bring on a seed drill, Great Plains was the first call that I made, because everything I read, everything I saw, customer reviews, all of it led me back to the same place, Great Plains. And for me, it's important, in what I do for a living, if a guy's going to go out and spend his hard-earned money, I want him sure as heck to know if he heard it from me, it's the truth, and this is the best quality. Now, like I've said, I haven't had a chance to use it, but I'm smart enough to read what a lot of other guys are saying, what everybody else out there is the buzz, and Great Plains was where it was at. So again, I'm super excited. Like I said, I think I said super excited like 900 times, this show, but I am, because this is new for me. I've been playing food plots for 18 years. It's not often that, like, hey, I'm gonna try something new this year. It's the stuff that got me there. So it is going to be new for me, but super pumped to be able to have Great Plains on board. And I want to thank you for being here. And what we're going to do, Justin, is I have a couple shameless plugs I got to do. We got to take a quick break for a commercial, and then I'm going to come back and answer a question. You can probably help me, because I have some details in it that I'd like to get your input on as well. But for everybody, that follows me, that I have the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza, and, Kendi has told me that Great Plains is going to be there, have some of their equipment. We're going to have 500-600 guys there. It's going to be January 31st. We are selling tickets now at magnetoutdoors.com. We've already sold 100 tickets. We're 6 months out. I think I started last week already. We've already sold 100 tickets to this event. So if you're interested, it's a day all about whitetail habitat. I have 2 guest speakers. I'll be talking on food plots, hunting strategy, and we have Jason Lapardis, who is the CEO of Turkeys for Tomorrow, and he's a habitat specialist. He's going to be talking hinge cutting, timber stand improvement, cover, all those things, prescribed burns. He's going to be talking about all that. So it's going to be a full day. If you're a property owner and you're interested in learning more about your property, how to manage it, for whatever your goals are, that's going to be the day. It's going to be a full day from 9 to 3 o'clock. We're going to have a ton. We're going to have Great Plains is going to be there. Coons is going to be there. I believe Realtree is going to be in, some other brands as well, 12-point hunting blinds. So I encourage you, if you're looking for tickets, go to my website at magnetoutdoors.com. Those tickets are now available. So that being said, we're going to get into, I'm going to take a quick break here, Justin, and thank a couple sponsors, and we'll be right back and we'll take this question.
There's nothing more I love than chasing big bucks, and one of the biggest game-changing products for me and making me more successful is Moultrie Mobile cellular trail cameras. Anybody knows big mature whitetail, especially in high-pressure states like Pennsylvania, they're not going to put up with much from humans. So the best thing we can do is stay out of the woods, stay out of that property when it gets close to hunting season, and the Moultrie Mobile cellular trail cameras have been a game changer for me. They have affordable plans, great cameras. I encourage you to check out the entire line at moultriemobile.com.
Okay, we are back. And as you know, Justin, I take questions. If you have a question for me, like I always say, I love this part of the show. It might be completely off topic about what we just spoke about, but man, I've been getting a bunch of guys who have been sending me questions. If you have a question for me, don't hesitate to email it to me. You can find my contact on the fielddaysmedia.com website, magnetoutdoors.com, All In Outdoors. There's multiple ways you can contact me and send me, a lot of you guys follow me on Facebook. You're in the food plot group. food plots for whitetail. So, however, man, if you have a question for me that you'd like me to answer, feel free to send that. And let me get into today's question. So, this is Merle in Lincoln County, Kentucky. He said, "Hey, Jason, I've been listening to your podcast for several years now, and I learned a lot. I see you plant a bunch of buckwheat. Can you talk about why you plant buckwheat and, more importantly, what you do with your buckwheat once it grows? Hope all that makes sense. P.S. We're coming to your whitetail habitat extravaganza and can't wait to meet you." Awesome, Earl. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys too. You know, I've guys already that bought tickets from Michigan, Kentucky, which is pretty flattering when you're all the way in Northwest PA to have guys travel that far. But looking forward to meeting you. And Justin, you might be able to help me with this, but I'm going to get in first and talk a little bit about buckwheat. I have started planting a lot. I planted almost every single plot this year. For me, what I look at buckwheat as. I've done it as a soil builder. I like to turn my buckwheat back in. I like to disc it back in the soil. Actually, I plant right now is a lot of buckwheat and sorghum. And, you know, farmers call buckwheat green manure, you know, and they call it green manure for a reason. And I built some really good quality soil. But I'll say about buckwheat, and again, I'm no expert on it because I've only been doing it for 2 years, but the things that I've read and everybody told me are true. It's a great weed control. It just grows up really fast before those weeds can. And, you know, when you're ready, and my general process of planting my buckwheat and sorghum is I try and aim for 6-7 weeks before I want to plant in the fall. So if I want to plant that first week of August, then I generally plant my buckwheat the third week of June. And that gets you to where that buckwheat pretty much, you know, gets maximum growth, and you can go in and what I do is I disc in and I seed right into it. So just a warning on that, you know, you need to be careful, you know, if your buckwheat goes to seed, because I learned the hard way on this one time. I let my buckwheat grow. I went and dished it in. I seeded, and then I came back like 2 weeks later, and everything was buckwheat because it had went to seed. So you do need to terminate it. That's very easy. You know, you can just disc, spray it with 41% gly, seed right into it. I get that question all the time. People are like, you know, can you seed, you know, after you've sprayed gly? Yeah, you know, gly is not going to affect your new seeds. And that's worked very well for me. So now the nice thing with buckwheat, if you wanted to plant in the middle of May, you could maybe get 2 crops out of it. You know, let it grow, go and disc it in, let it grow again and disc it in, and you get, you know, double the benefits. So it's really up to you and how you want to use it. But buckwheat is for me, I've really looked at it as a soil builder. Now, there's a lot of other guys out there that are looking at it as the whole moisture aspect, right? Like buckwheat's a great way to grow it. And I'll be honest in this, I was going to try this the one year, and it kind of just deterred me. There were a lot of steps, and then we ended up having a drought. My buckwheat only grew maybe, you know, 12 inches. And it was like, okay, it didn't even get tall enough to really do that. But what you'll see a lot of guys do is crimping, right? You know, they'll go in, they'll seed right into the buckwheat, you know, and then they'll crimp that buckwheat. And I've seen that be really successful. It makes a lot of sense to me because in essence, what you're doing, you're creating that moisture. You know, you're holding that moisture in the soil, and I've seen it be very successful. So that's another way that guys are using buckwheat. Now my question to you, Justin, would be: are there guys that are doing that, crimping it, and then can you drill through buckwheat? Is that possible, or is that something that, you know, I thought of that. I haven't really seen guys doing that, but is that something that you can do?
Yes, I'm definitely gonna say, you know, that you definitely could drill,
Okay.
you know, through buckwheat, keeping in mind all of those other factors that we talked about, you know, kind of earlier on in the show. And with that, like if that, so like what we talked about before we started, you know, I'm really big on, call it qualifying the customer. Like let's figure out what practices you're doing, where you're at, what your capabilities and needs are, and then we can find the product that suits you. So if there's a guy out there that's wanting to do this exactly, I would I would caution them, you know, or push them towards getting whatever size drill you know you want, or it's going to fit. Let's look at coulters on it. You know, that front set of opening coulters is going to give tremendous benefits for planting through, you know, that buckwheat, because it's the coulter on those things, Jason, is it's a 5/16 fluted coulter, you know, so it doesn't have a very big profile, you know, going into the ground. You know, it's not a huge surface area we're having to try to penetrate. You know, we're 5/16 fluted coulter, so we're able to slice through a lot of that, let's call it crimp buckwheat for right now.
Yeah.
You're just able to slice right through it, and then you're opening the furrow right under the buckwheat, and it's just the most effective way to get
Makes
seed in the
sense.
ground.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, it was just when I saw this question, I didn't really
Mhm.
think it was related, but got me thinking throughout the podcast. Wow, could you, and now do you think the scenario would be, would you go in to your buckwheat, crimp it, whatever they do to flatten it, then drill right into that, or would you go drill, then crimp it?
I would crimp it and then drill.
Crimp it, then
Just
drill.
just from a compaction standpoint.
Yep.
Because I wouldn't want to go and drill everything and then run, 4 more tractor tires and, whatever
I
the
get it.
crimpers got tired, whatever
Sure.
I wouldn't want to add that more compaction to the seed. So I would probably
You'd
crimp
crimp,
first,
then drill.
then drill. Yep.
Yeah,
Hmm.
perfect. Okay. Well, again, thank you for that question. Again, I look forward to seeing Merle at the Whitetail Habitat Extravaganza. So, like I said, make sure you go get your tickets. And Justin, we're gonna wrap it up. We went an hour and 3 minutes, so it was just about perfect. We usually shoot for an hour. It goes fast, and today's went really fast. I appreciate you. I'm sure you and I are going to be talking way more often as time goes on here. But
Absolutely.
I appreciate you taking the time and explaining all this. Again, how can, your website address, do you have a 1-800 number, anything like that? Do you know off the top of your head if anybody's looking to talk specifically to Great Plains about any drills, maybe the Food Plot line, the Stealth Pro series, which is what I'm using, but heck, just call them and they're going to tell you what you need.
Exactly. So, Jason, I would say, let's, to all your audience, greatplainsag.com is going to be the first place to start. We're going to have all the information that you could ever need to know about, the offerings that we've got for the Stealth Pro line, the whole 9 yards. There's also a dealer locator tab on our website, and that's where I would encourage, let's encourage the audience to start there. Greatplainsag.com, go to dealer locator, find the dealer closest to you, and then let's go talk to that dealer, about
What works?
learning, right?
Yeah.
Because another thing that I want to add too, real quick, before we get off, uh, when you do that, you're getting, 20, 25, 30 years of experience from some of the guys that have been, within Great Plains for a long time. You're getting all that experience to answer your questions,
Mm-hmm.
that you have. So that once you get a hold of, Great Plains, like you're getting the answer that you're looking for, and the place that starting at the dealer level with that. Um, and then we can get in contact with the territory managers, with the product specialists. We're kind of scattered all throughout the country. To make sure that we get you the product that fits you. Facebook, Instagram, Great Plains Ag, the whole 9 yards. You find us all there. But yeah, that's greatplainsag.com will have, I mean,
Everything you
that'd be
need.
the first place
Best
to
place.
start. You find
Perfect.
everything you need to know.
Perfect. All right, Justin. Well, hey, we're gonna wrap it up here. Like I said, happy plotting, happy hunting coming up here soon. Thank you for being a guest, and I'm sure I'm gonna have you on at some other time. Maybe we'll do this again next, maybe in the spring or something, and talk about spring plots and then how my fall went and what I did
Sure.
right and what I did wrong and all that good stuff. But thanks for being here. And yeah, that's we're gonna wrap it up here. So once again, I want to thank all the listeners out there. I do want to say something, man. The response to the seed company and the seed blends has been overwhelming. I appreciate you guys trusting me with your food plot seed needs. Thank you guys for believing in me and buying my seeds. And I look forward to, we're coming out with 2 new blends next year that we've tested for a long time. So excited to bring those to market. So stay tuned for that. And it's that time, get out there, time to start planting, and hunting season will be here before we know it. So thanks for joining us, Justin. Thank you again. And we're signing off.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.